Okay, so just to make it absolutely clear, in case anybody is listening and hasn't seen your platform, we're talking about, so on the range of simulations, we could be talking about physical simulations, which we're not. We're talking about digital. And in the digital space, we're not talking about 3D environments of machinery. We're not talking about manufacturing. We're not talking about VR or AR enabled walkthroughs of a building or building information management systems or digital twin style simulations. But what we're talking about really is the soft skill narrative rehearsal of things like role playing, where you can talk back and forth with a conversational agent. And to some degree, you have variation depending on what it is that you're doing. Fair?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Thanks for articulating that so well.
So in that space, we have the potential. We're not there yet in the grand scheme of everything that we could do with simulation, but we have the potential to digitize a large part of the rehearsal, the experience, the practice that people can do when it comes to things like conversation. And that requires obviously the conversational inputs from, let's say, generative AI more broadly, but we could be talking about large language models through to avatars and simulations of people. But we also, on the flip side, probably need something that allows you to talk. So some kind of speech recognition or a keyword recognition that allows the construct to pick up whatever it is that you're saying and move the scenario forward. So for everybody listening,
I just want
that's
to address
probably what
something
it
that
is.
you touched upon, Ash, earlier, and you made a super interesting observation, which is that today, you've got information, you've got courses, plenty of them available out there. Now, the real question is, when does true learning happen, right? Does it happen when everything is convenient? And I ask this whenever I interact with people, with leaders. When has your best learning happened? Was it when everything was comfortable and convenient, or when you were faced with an adversary? Almost every time, everybody says it was through adversity, right? Now,
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
to create a learning system that creates adversity for people, but the real idea is how do you create a crucible experience at a time when it's not so much about learning today, it's also about unlearning all those habits that we've picked up from the industrial age. We need to be shaken up a little bit, and we need to be told, hey, that doesn't work anymore, right? For that, we need to put people through a powerful experience that lets them sort of unlearn as well. So that's the crucible experience that we create through the system.
So there's a point about psychological immersion there, I think, which is that if we were to take the thread and make the assumption on things like learning theory, where we would say that I have a mental model or a schema of the world, this is how I think, this is how I think the world works. And I have a stimulus, some kind of information or experiential stimulus that changes that through the process of cognitive or emotional work. So I'm going to do some kind of work in my brain because the stimulus has caused me to do that. And eventually I will change what I think of the world. Probably not my value set, but how I think things work. Now that you need the stimulus to create that work. And back to what you said earlier, you said something around being able to do things in a safe space. The idea of simulations and flight simulations is that safe space. And a simulation needs to be immersive enough such that people can lose this idea that this is just a simulation. This is a safe space. So I'm doing the thing that I know I should do rather than the thing that I would do, because those are very different actions that you take in a digital construct. How do you achieve this idea of immersion?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we don't do too much in the way of VR or AR or the 3D environments and so on. The practical difficulties for achieving scale with those things. What we employ is, we've been studying this whole space of gamification even before it was a thing, even before it was a term. We were studying that very closely in terms of human engagement. How do you engage people? I think that's one of the things that's often overlooked in learning design. We assume that, okay, this is great content and people will stay on it. But no, there are competing pressures that we've got, right? How do you draw people in? I think the first thing that we take care of in the design is curiosity. There's something that is challenging about that storytelling. Hey, you're going to be playing this character in this organization and the profits are going down and you've been picked to do something. So there's a sense of mission, there's a sense of ownership and doership that we attach to that role that creates a certain level of drama in this thing and curiosity that, hey, this is interesting, right? I think that's at the level of engagement, we need to get this right from the get go. And I think the first 5-10 minutes, we need to focus on what's in it for the learner. They need to see very quickly that if I stay engaged on this for an hour, I'm going to be better off. How do you quickly show them that experience? So that's a critical one because oftentimes after 5 minutes, we know this from a consumer experience as well. right? We are busy scrolling on something, and then we lose interest. So how do you sustain that interest over a period of time? Is by creating a sense of connection, and that's where the safe environment comes in. It's real life like many of
So
our learners. Yeah.
just to make sure we're not talking about two different things. So engaging a learner through game based or game like mechanics, gamification, is very different from psychological immersion, where somebody is making the decision that they would make rather than the one that they think they should make.
Yeah.
So they're immersed, and I don't necessarily mean VR. I mean the psychological side of things. And of course, if nobody's looked at this, then maybe this is a white space for people to go and look into. But that's the difference, I think, between what we're talking about. So let's put a pin in that one, because one eye on the time, we are only two
Yeah.
letters in to the blur, right? So we had boundaryless organizations, we had limitless digitization, and the U is unbounded innovation. So again, the concept of freedom, the concept of releasing the shackles of the past and moving forward into a utopian age that we can craft with our own hands. So unbounded innovation, describe that in the model. What are we talking about there?
So in unbounded innovation, the underlying line that's blurring is the industry boundary. So just to build this up, the organizational boundary, the line between the physical, digital, and the biological. Now we are talking about the industry boundary blurring. And we know this to be true. Pretty much every industry is trying to fit into this rectangle. Digital is a major converging force. It makes different products compete for attention, and it's all getting squeezed into the screen. So as I mentioned earlier, owning the customer and owning customers' attention is crucial. And whatever gives me that ability is what organizations are doing. For example, Grab, a taxi company in Southeast Asia, is also a bank. The logic there is if I have 20 million, 25 million people using my app on a daily basis, right, I could be a bank for them as well.
Sure.
And this is something that
Yeah.
Uber's CEO said, if I could get you something in 5 minutes, if I can get you a cab in 5 minutes, I can get you anything in 5 minutes. So that's a part of the thought process which makes you go out of your industry definition to really think about what does my customer need. If I have owned my customer or part of the customer's experience, how do I expand along the customer journey map? And that becomes the direction for innovation, as opposed to saying, I've got my raw materials, I've got my resources, I've got PhDs, and now I'm going to innovate. That was the industrial way of
Mm.
thinking. Now that innovation does not have to happen in your organization. Using your platform, you can bring those services in, but how do you connect the customer experience end to end, right, through customer journey map? That's the unbounded innovation we're talking about.
So I'm familiar with innovation models. I've used them in the past, Dublin, etc. And organizations might have different innovation strategies. How do you pinpoint where the ideas come from? How do you select them? What's the kind of incubator model that you have? All of these things I've seen out in industry, but there's always a question. And the question is, what is innovation? So innovation could be, this thing is new to me, therefore it is innovation. But in the market sense, you have something that may be disruptive, maybe changes significantly what the paradigm is, or something that just changes the competitive advantage of one business. So, what is innovation to you in the context of this book?
So the innovation to me is being super customer centric, using that as a true north to determine where will I go next, what will I do next. And going back to this Grab example, if I have 25 million users, they are transacting with me on a daily basis. This is pretty much a service that we use on a daily basis. And if you take a large private bank, and I'm thinking of a large private bank in India, they've got about 15 million customers. So here you have a taxi company that has more daily active users compared to a large private bank, right? So can I use that asset that I have to think about what else does this person need, so that I own the entire experience? So that becomes the method or the thought process around innovation. To me, it's about really understanding what is the customer doing, where are they going next with it, and
Mm,
can I follow the customer literally, right?
okay.
So that I keep owning their experience end to end, as opposed to what you said, right? This is what's new to me, or this is what I can offer, do something unique for the world. So that has still a place, but I think the way most organizations are starting to think about is what does the customer need? What are the evolving preferences that they have? And how do I deliver value to them?
Yeah, I'm asking you something slightly different, and that is, what is the word innovation itself? because we see this in different companies, right? The word innovation itself can mean different things. And in the context of what you're saying, of course, the innovation in your book might be customer centricity. But if you were to go to a client, you're going to a conference, you're pitching something, you're saying something about innovation. What does the word actually mean?
The word innovation, to me, what it